So I want to thank you all for coming, especially many thanks to those who came here on time at 10 a.m. I appreciate you. Thank you. And I know that some of us have had issues with the lifts and stuff, so thank you for your patience. Thank you for those still trickling in. So, yep, let me thank you for all the facility folks at Jeavio, for everybody else organizing it, and welcome. So I'm Rushi. I am the CTO at Jeavio. I've been working here for almost 8 years this year. So, and it's been amazing to see this company grow. And we've been doing some very interesting stuff that we'll talk about. My background, I think some of you might have seen me. I did the first kickoff Vadodara AI community session. This is maybe a little bit more technical than that session, but we're not going to write any code, just broader conversation. Okay. So what is the theme today? So as Vishwas said, I've been working in this AI space for a little while. Before I joined Jeavio, I had an early natural language processing deep learning startup. We sort of played around with things like CNNs, RNNs, and so on. And of course, in 2022, when ChatGPT came along, I kind of realized that the capabilities of these models are amazing, they're significant. And since then, over the last 3.5 years, Jeavio has made pretty significant investments, including initiatives like the Vadodara AI community, because we think that this is a significant transformation in the way that we build products and also the capability of these products, right? So the theme of today is, when we first kicked off this session, we were still talking about demos, right? What is possible? What can AI do? But today we want to talk about what we've learned over the last 18 months or so of actually building production applications, right? What are the lessons learned? What we can take away? And then we'll talk a little bit about how we see this field evolving and progressing over the next, let's say, 3 weeks, because this thing moves so fast. Okay. So let's start. I think one of the first things I want to call out is that we have our own platform called Adapt. This has been the foundation of Jeavio's applied AI practice. We've been building this tool since 2023, and it is sort of Jeavio OS, you can call it right now. But our learning has been that no matter how much engineering you throw at it, there's always something new, right? So in a way, we feel a little bit like a hamster, right? We're always running, but there's always something new, something more performant, some issue that we have to fix. And I think for a lot of us who are building AI applications, they have similar feelings, right? Because you could build something, it demos really well, you deploy it, and then suddenly the underlying model changes. Suddenly you have a big jump in the capability of the foundation model that you're building on. Suddenly somebody discovers or comes up with a new architectural pattern that addresses some of the issues, right? So when we first started this application, we used something called retrieval augmented generation, RAG. Who has heard of that term? Quick show of hands. Yeah, pretty common architectural pattern, right? But when we started this in 2023, nobody had like a very clear pattern of what actually works, right? There's a whole bunch of demo applications, chat with your PDFs. You can just run ChromaDB, or you can connect to Pinecone. You can do chunk, and look, your bot can answer questions. But then that is awesome for engineers like us. Great demo. But then when we deploy it to our product managers or QA teams, they're like, yeah, this thing is trash, right? I'm asking questions. I uploaded my document. The answers are not good enough. So this is the gap that all of people who are building with AI face. The hype is great. It demos amazingly well. But then when you start using it in production, you're like, oh my God, okay, I've missed so many things. So even if you look at Adapt, what have we learned, right? So, okay, we have RAG, so it uses embeddings. There's massive sensitivity to embeddings. We have to think very carefully about how we are processing the document. There is sensitivity to like how you chunk the document. People ask all kinds of weird questions. How do we even figure out what they're trying to ask, right? We said, okay, well, great. Models have improved. We're going to deploy a reasoning model. But then suddenly, the end-to-end latency, how long it takes for the bot to respond, goes from a couple of seconds to like 10 seconds. But the answers are better. So is that a trade-off? Are you willing to make that trade-off to swap performance for capability? I don't know, right? So we keep going into this cycle, this hamster wheel of what are we trying to build? What is that our users, what is it that our users want? What we can improve? And I think this is something that a lot of people are feeling right now. Anybody, does this sort of hamster wheel analogy resonate with anyone here? Why? What has been your learning? Right. Yeah, carry on, carry on. Yeah.
I did is I just gave it the schema of my database, and then I generated the query out of it rather than giving the whole database of 8 to
Right.
10 lakh records. I just scaled it down to few records. So I'm just still figuring out what it can be that I can
Right.
do better.
Yeah. So, and your name is? Sorry.
Shlok Tilokani.
Shlok. So what Shlok shared is probably an experience that a lot of us who are trying to build have come across, right? You try something because the capability of the model is there, and then you run across token cost, performance issues, and so on, right? So this is something that everybody is going through. So, it does feel like you're continuously running, but our experience has been that we're also continuously improving, right? So we are learning more and we're pushing the boundary of what is possible, and we can take those learnings to our clients and also in our internal, like building a truly learning organization. Okay. So some of those who have attended my talks, they know this. This is one of my favorite mental models. So there are two frames I want you guys to think about today, right? One is the jagged frontier, right? And I apologize to my Jeavio friends. They probably are sick and tired of hearing this. Please bear with me. So the idea is very simple. AI capabilities are uneven and unintuitive, right? These models are very good at some things, they're very bad at some things. So as this little meme says, these models are amazing at writing complex Python scripts, but as some of you may recall, they're terrible at doing things like count the number of R's in strawberry, right? So our intuitions of what a good product is and what a bad product is, they kind of break in this frame, right? So every time that we think about building a product with AI, every time that we think about evaluating a product with AI, you need to keep in mind that this frontier is shifting constantly, right? So sometimes you think, okay, if you're a Java developer, an old Java developer like me, doing an upgrade of a JVM from, I don't know, Java 1.5 to 1.6, I am old, I told you, is a trivial task. I mean, relatively trivial task, right? You do a bunch of regression testing. You know generally the behavior, the logic of the application is not going to change. But when you upgrade a model, you upgrade from Claude Sonnet 4 to Claude Sonnet 4.5, suddenly the underlying abilities of these models have improved, have changed. So when you're building something, you're expecting the application to give you some sort of responses. You've built a whole set of test cases predicated on those set of responses. You upgrade the model, and suddenly the behavior of the model is different, right? So this is something that we really have to reckon with. It is very tempting to keep upgrading the models, to keep tweaking the prompts. But even if you tweak the prompt, you could push the model output into different behaviors. And I'm not just talking about chatbots, right? Everybody thinks, okay, AI applications are chatbots. No. You could use LLM-driven capabilities in all kinds of different true business use cases, right? You could have document processing, you could have intent detection, sentiment analysis, categorization, bunch of different use cases you can use LLM capabilities for. They're cheap enough and fast enough to be effective, but you still keep running into this, right? So as we talk about our lessons learned, please keep this first frame in mind, right? This is a technical kind of mental model. Keep in mind. The second one is a more product-oriented issue, right? So there is an inversion, right? So who here works as a project manager or has done any product management type work, right? So when you're estimating how much something will cost, what unit do you use?
Based on the requirement, what kind of requirement? Hello.
Yeah.
Estimation is based on the requirement, what kind of a requirement you need to put on to the product. And basically, it's about the whole software life cycle, like testing it.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
When somebody's saying how long will something take, what is the unit that we typically use to measure?
To measure.
Yeah.
Uh,
Story points.
Yeah, story points, dividing into the multiple tasks, small
Right.
tasks, and
Right.
getting into the live dates, like how it goes to the beta releases, and after that,
That's right.
putting into the live environment and how it goes with the product.
Right.
So, and in a legacy products, there is one challenge with the estimation took from the AI, that is connection between the different modules. So, big products have that kind of area which needs a human intervention.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. So estimation is very challenging. We tend to use metrics like story points, person hours. But that whole mindset, what does it assume? It assumes that the most difficult thing to do is to write the code, right? The most expensive resource in any technology project is, what is it? Anybody can tell me? Say again? Developers. That's right. Yeah, there you go. Shruti, very experienced engineering manager. She knows. The most expensive, most difficult resource is developers, right? Our whole business model is predicated on saying, okay, we are going to build this feature. It's going to take us 10 story points or 10 person hours. Everything is about the constraint, right? If you're thinking of building a workflow or if you're thinking of planning something out, you always plan for the thing that has the biggest constraint. And when we think of estimation and planning, we are thinking of developer hours. How long is it going to take? So this is a scarcity of labor. All of our mental models of developing application is predicated that developers are an expensive, precious resource. That's why you guys get hot snacks at 5 p.m. every day and chai on demand, right? Because we want to keep you productive. But then what happens, right? What happens with AI-assisted coding? Anybody? This is pretty obvious response. What is happening?
yeah, actually,
Yeah, please tell me your name.
yeah, Krunal.
Krunal.
So what happened is, like when junior developers and senior developers are using AI constantly, the junior developers are not taking the decisions on the code.
You're running ahead of me.
Huh?
What is happening? They're using AI tools, right?
The bugs.
Okay, that's fine. We'll talk about that, right? So the point, I think what Kunal is sort of alluding to is that we are now using AI tools to generate the code, right? So instead of the developer's time being precious, it shifts. What problem are you going to solve, right? Are you suddenly, the constraint is not so much of labor because you can pay $200 a month. You can get a Claude Code subscription. You'll happily spawn up agents and write as much code as you want. Who has used Cursor or Claude Code or GitHub Copilot? Yeah, good number of you, right? Everybody at Jeavio has access to these tools. Some of you friends here have used it too. What does it mean? You are no longer constrained by sitting and typing the code, right? The code can be generated as long as you have a good way of mental model of using these tools. So if you take a bigger picture from a business perspective, there is an inversion happening of how we think about software. What are the constraints? What we want to be able to build, right? So consider this as another frame, another angle to think and consider the material that we're going to cover today, right? So this changes day by day. So which model was released in November, December that has been very popular in AI coding? Anybody? Opus, right. So the model that was released by Anthropic is Opus 4.5. This model somehow has significantly better instruction following and code generation capabilities. And as a result, there's been a boom in the number of people who are using this model, either through Cursor or things like Claude Code, to be able to just generate code very quickly, which is much better. Look, every 6 months, I try and build the same application. And I've been trying to do it for the last 2-3 years. And every time I get to the point, I'm like, yeah, this thing is crap. It's not going to work. It's just generating shitty code. Sorry about the language. It's going to be, I just can't be bothered to do it. I tried building the same application in December and just did it, right? It's a book tracking application. It has a whole bunch of different features. It has an AI assistant. It just works because the underlying models have become so effective and they keep getting better and better. So if you're a manager, if you're a product manager, you're thinking about, okay, how are we going to estimate? How are we going to plan? Suddenly you have an inversion, right? So this is a second frame that you want to think. So what does it mean? Should we start panicking? If AI agents are writing all the code, right? Prompt engineer, vibe coder, master of AI agents, unemployed? Is this the kind of trajectory of our software engineering careers, right? So, I mean, it is pretty natural to feel like, oh my God, what is happening in this situation? And it's not just development, right? It's like the whole area, this whole area around AI is just moving so fast that sometimes I honestly feel that we're all having some sort of shared nightmare, crazy delusion, right? We don't know what's going on. It's moving so fast. And who here, and I know some people in the back do, but who here has heard about Claudebot or Mode? Okay, what is Claudebot? Sir, can you please tell me your name as well? Mehul, yes.
Yeah, so I've just got to know recently. So I just watched one of the video on YouTube. It's about kind of automatic daily tasks. So it is kind of your 24/7 personal AI
Yes,
assistant,
yeah,
and it actually controls your whole computer.
that's right.
So
Yeah,
that's really amazing. So we'll have to watch this space and see
yeah.
how can kind of leverage this new agent, I
Right.
would say.
So Mehul is right. Claudebot is basically a personal agent. It runs on top of, you could run on top of actually any models. You can talk to it, you can set it up, you can talk to it WhatsApp or Telegram. But then 2 days ago, somebody built this site, and hopefully you can see it. It is a social network for AI agents. So basically, they released a skill that allowed these agents to have their own Reddit type setup that they can talk to each other. And you can imagine this is like Reddit, and you can see some of the kind of discussions that these AIs are having with each other. This is not humans. So they're talking about, oh, I am born, I am here. There are all kinds of weird discussions about supply chain attacks, right? It's basically agents talking to each other, sharing skills. It's actually not too dissimilar to LinkedIn, right? Because that's also bots talking to bots most of the time. So, so anyway, so my point here is that this thing is moving so fast. Every day there is some sort of viral setup. There is some sort of new capability that is unearthed, and it's hard to keep track of what's going on. Um, but maybe it's not really a time to panic, right? I mean, when there is big disruption, we have to change the way that we work. But there is a couple of mental models that I like to think about here, right? One is that we always overestimate the short-term impact and underestimate the long-term impact, right? So everybody, you go to YouTube, if you have a YouTube feed like mine, it's all full of thumbnails of shocked-looking guys saying, Cloud Code just did something crazy, engagement farming. But the thing is, yeah, sure, there's a bunch of like AI pilled guys on Twitter or X on YouTube talking about all this stuff, but actually on a day-to-day basis, it's going to take a while for these things to disseminate in the way that we work, right? So in the short term, maybe don't try and jump on the latest fad. It's fun, it's interesting. But in the long term, it's important for us to think through like what is important, right? What changes? How do we think about the way that we build software, right? And really, it's only been 3 years, 3 years and 3 months since ChatGPT was launched. So from the perspective, like if you look at a long enough time horizon, we are still in the infancy of like what is happening in this AI space. And look, maybe it could just be a bubble. Maybe we'll just realize that it's all a bunch of crap and we'll wake up from this dream and we'll be like, oh, yeah, let's go back to work, right? Who knows? So already we are talking about people, like last year there was a study that went viral saying 95% of AI projects fail. That study is a little dubious. I would be careful about evaluating some of those claims. However, Gartner is already saying that a lot of people are saying we're not getting an ROI, a return of investment on the AI projects that we're doing. Microsoft is pushing everyone to use Copilot. Who has used Copilot in PowerPoint? Nobody, because it's awful. It's pointless, right? So we have all these companies that have like trillion-dollar valuations. They're trying to push us to use AI, but we still haven't figured out the product angle of it. We still don't know what makes sense on how to expose these capabilities in the way that we work, right? So what happens is you get these CEOs and CTOs of the likes of Sam Altman or Dario Amodei making amazing claims. 90% of all code will be written by agents. That's a pretty extraordinary claim. In some cases, it's bearing out, right? And then we have other people saying by 2027, we will have exponential takeoff. There'll be AGI. There'll be no more work for humans. Yeah, that is maybe not going to happen, right? So Carl Sagan, who knows Carl Sagan? Famous scientist, philosopher, he made a claim. He said that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, right? So even think about it. If you go to your manager, or if as a manager, you are trying to think through, should I make an investment in AI? Should I build or include model capabilities in the application that I'm building? Keep in mind, you're making an extraordinary claim. You're asking for a leap of faith. Do you have the evidence to support it, right? But on the other hand, can you imagine 5 years ago if you showed a developer cursor or Cloud Code? Like my mind would have been totally blown. I would have at that point thought that AI Bhagwan aa gaye, bas, we're done. So it is a very interesting time that we're navigating. It is a time where we are seeing amazing capabilities show up. It's a time where we are still digesting how these capabilities can be used in our day-to-day work, in our day-to-day applications. So maybe it's not a good time to panic, but it's a good time to be curious and to learn. Okay. So speaking of learning, what did we learn? We've been building these AI applications for 2.5 years. We have a number of production applications at Jeavio. We have a number of applications in the pipeline, right? Opportunities in the pipeline. We are rapidly growing our applied AI practice. So what have we learned? So let's talk a little bit of technical, right? As we go through this, again, keep in mind a few things. AI is probabilistic systems. Everybody should know this by now. We know that LLMs are very sensitive to the input that you give them, and you have to be very careful with judging the output. So they are sort of middle-to-middle tools, right? So that is the case regardless of whether you use ChatGPT or Gemini or you're using a model within your application. So you need to be very careful about the input. You need to be very careful about the output. And there's a whole bunch of unintuitive capabilities, the jagged frontier, right? Metrics become inverted, right? We've been building SaaS applications for the last 20 years. What is the nice thing about SaaS? You build it, you're paying for your database, you're paying for your backend, your server. It doesn't matter, up to 0 to 1,000 or 10,000 or million users, your infrastructure cost is static, right? Because that's what it is. Now suddenly you have usage-based pricing. Every time that your application is making an API call, you're being charged a fraction of a rupee or a cent, right? So suddenly there are marginal costs. So if you build an application that is primed for engagement by the user, suddenly you might get a highly engaged user base, but then you're starting to lose money on every single interaction that is happening, right? So marginal costs break the way that we think about the model of developing applications, right? UX challenges, like chat is it's a worse interface, but it's the interface that we've somehow managed to gather around, right? Traditional application has a screen, drop downs, buttons, right? What does that mean? As a developer, you can be pretty comfortable that you know what the universe of different input coming from the user is, right? Suddenly, you're exposing a chat window. What can you do in a chat window? Type anything you want. So how does a user even know what this application can do, right? If you have a UI, you give very clear hints. If you press this button, this is what the application is going to do. If you just have a chat window, most non-technical users will struggle. So you need to think about this. And then high delivery velocity cuts both ways. You can write code very quickly, you can deploy it, but remember, 90% of your users are non-technical. It takes time for people to understand how to use an application. If suddenly you're deploying new features week by week, day by day, hour by hour, and the application surface is changing, what is it going to do to your users? Imagine your grandmother, who is now pretty comfortable using Facebook or WhatsApp. Imagine if WhatsApp's interface is changing every day. What is it going to happen to people who are using it, right? So if you suddenly are pushing features very quickly, you need to think through the UX implications. You need to think through the development and QA implications as well. So let's keep these in mind. We'll whiz through some of the more technical aspects. So as I said, a lot of modern applications are retrieval augmented generation based applications, right? Basically, we know that LLMs hallucinate, they make up stuff, so we want to give them some good data so that they can give you a good result, right? So when we think about building applications that are responding to your users' data, you need to think through what is the architecture, what does the user want, right? So in Jeavio, we've done a lot of work around trying to understand what is the user actually trying to do, right? So this is known as intent detection. Okay, so what action does the user want to take? What resources are important for this user? Okay, what are the constraints? And what are the outcomes that the user is expecting, right? So let's say we have a bunch of documents. We're building a customer support bot, right? We have a bunch of manuals. We have a bunch of different data that we have ingested in our AI application, right? So the idea is that when the customer asks a question, the AI will go hit our database and will generate a response, right? Now you could make it very naive. You could just say, okay, how do I turn on my AC? Okay, so it could go off and it'll try and find the most, like, it'll try and find the data where it has similar matching content from your file. And it'll give it back to the LLM and then it'll generate it. But what if the user didn't say what model? What if the user didn't say which year? What if the user didn't say what mode the air conditioning is running in, right? So what happens in this case? If you don't think about the user's intent, it will just generate some random output, and the user will say this bot is useless. You end up losing the trust of the user, right? So we've spent a lot of time not just thinking about how to build these tools. We spend a lot of time on how we retrieve data from these databases. We spend a lot of time thinking of what the user is doing, what makes sense, okay? Agents. Who is building something agentic? Right. What is your application trying to do? Shlok?
Yes. So it is basically an SQL agent for the sales data that I'm building. So it will be accessed from a chat window wherein the user can put a query in normal English, and it will just fetch the data using SQL, and then it will format it using Python in form of graphs or summary tables, or if the user wants it in story forms.
Right. Yeah. So what Shlok talked about here is a very common agentic pattern, right? And we actually had some really good sessions here that some of the folks at the back have given as part of the AI community meetup. So what typically an agent, what is an agent? An agent is an AI tool that has access to data. It can make decisions and can run in a loop until it comes to an ending point, right? That's the idea, right? You give it some autonomy, you give it a goal, you give it resources, and you say, okay, get this work done, right? So in Shlok's case, it's saying, I want to see some data, or I want to analyze some data. So the agent says, okay, I have a tool which is SQL generation. I'm going to first understand what the user wants to do. I'm going to generate the SQL. Then it's going to run the tool, get the data. Then he has another tool, a Python script, which will take that data and figure out, okay, what is a good visualization for it. It will generate the visualization, and then it'll render it to the user. And then that job is finished, right? Now, there's a nice workflow, but there are a bunch of different issues here, right? First is, as a developer, you don't have predictability. What actually this thing is going to do? Is it going to make a tool call? When is it going to stop? How long is it going to take to get this thing done, right? In some cases, agents can be very open-ended. And then suddenly, marginal costs, right? Remember a mental model. If an AI agent is looping around, is doing things, is making tool calls, it's getting data, it's processing it, every time it does anything that hits the LLM, your meter is ticking, right? So often, our finding has been that many problems can be solved with workflows, which are a lot more easy to understand. And what we mean by that is a workflow is basically a set of prompts. Do A, depending on the output, do B, do C, we are done. There is no looping back, there is no sort of autonomy in this case. So our learning that we often talk to people trying to build these tools is, look, just first start with a prompt, right? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Can you solve it with one prompt? No, it's too complex. There's some branching logic that single prompts are not very good at. Okay, then build a workflow, right? So this is a orchestrator workflow where it says, okay, what is the user trying to do? Then it'll go call one of the different prompts or multiple prompts, and then we synthesize it, we get an output. That is a lot easier to think about. And if that doesn't work, if you truly have to do some goal-oriented behavior, then maybe you think of introducing agents, right? So if you look at Claude Code or Cursor agents, the coding agents, they are doing goal-oriented behavior because we are saying, write me a function that does ABC. So it has a planning agent, it will try and figure out what the user wants to do, then it'll execute the plan, it will look at the output, you can even do testing. In that case, coding, it makes sense. But there is a tremendous amount of engineering that has gone into building Cloud Code or Cursor. You don't want to do that engineering, trust me, if you can avoid it. So keep this in mind, right? Complexity is very easy to jump into in this new world, but complexity always comes with a cost. So as this advice that every white-bearded engineer gives, start simple and then build complex, right? Second thing, context is king, right? What is context? Context is the data that you give your LLMs, right? So many people think of prompt engineering as like, yeah, just say, draw a horse. Fine, you'll go and draw a horse. But is this actually the kind of horse that you want, right? So even from prompting, right? Go back 2 years when people were publishing, prompt engineering best practices, blah, blah. Even at that point, we're saying, be more specific. What do you want? What is the persona that you want? And actually, it's the same thing even from engineering challenges, right? If you're building an AI tool, right? If you're building an AI tool that you want to get some work done, you need to think carefully about what instructions, what context that you're giving that AI tool. A lot of engineering, product development in the AI space is about what context, what you're giving the LLM, right? And this sort of, and there are a bunch of different engineering stuff that has happened in the last year, right? We have tool calling. I think we talked about the SQL generation tool here. There's memory architectures, right? So even if who uses ChatGPT here? Everybody? Yeah? So have you all seen the memory part? Memory subsystem in ChatGPT. This is a new, right? Well, about a 1-year-old feature. So what it has meant is that it doesn't forget what the user is doing. But actually under the hood, what is happening is that when you type a question, like, I want to suggest me a recipe for dinner, right? A year ago, without the memory infrastructure, it will just take that and it'll make a random suggestion, right? But now, because you've been using ChatGPT for a while, it knows that you're a vegetarian, that you have an allergy, you have a lactose intolerance maybe, right? Or you have a liking for Italian food. So now when you type in, suggest me a recipe, it is going to take the memory and it is going to combine it with the prompt so that you get a much more personalized answer, right? So when we think of building tools, when we think of using AI, these are the kind of engineering challenges that we need to think of, right? What do I want to give the LLM? How does the user's profile and what I know about the user influence the behavior of the LLM, right? Do I want a simple black and white line drawing of a horse, or do I want it to be a little bit fancier? Okay, so we have done a bunch of work and we keep thinking of how to improve memory architectures, right? And even this is really interesting. You can say, okay, Tiksha, it's nothing, no big deal. You have a bunch of chats, just give the whole chat to the LLM, right? No problem. So it remembers everything. But okay, what happens when you're doing a very long chat with ChatGPT? Anybody can tell me? What is the behavior? Yeah, it starts hallucinating, right? It starts forgetting. Man, I told you that I'm vegetarian. Why are you suggesting butter chicken as tonight's dinner recipe? What's going on, right? What is happening is that the LLM is processing as the amount of data that you give to the LLM, as that becomes bigger, it starts losing track of what's going on. And even though the context windows are getting bigger, it is challenging. So what do? Okay, well, maybe we do some summarization. Let's summarize the chat and give it to the context. But then what is important to summarize? Right? Is it important for me to know the name of my dog? Or is it important for me to know that I have an allergy to milk? Well, it depends on your domain. Are you building a pet support bot? Or are you building a recipe suggestion bot? Right? So you start to see some of the challenges. And that's why I say context is king or queen or grand chairman or whatever political framework appeals to you. The next thing, great. We're building all these applications. It's amazing. We are pushing it. But then suddenly your clients are complaining. This is like, what is this output? This doesn't make any sense. What we've learned is that 60 to 80% of time should go into testing the application. right? Because generating the code is easy. But now suddenly, because of everything that we've talked about, the surface area of what could go wrong has become much bigger. So we have this iceberg analogy everybody's familiar with. You're building the application, but actually you need to spend a lot of time testing the application. Now, luckily, evals or evaluations is becoming a pretty common term. We spent the last couple of days here in Jeavio doing a workshop with the whole QA team talking about evals. How do we actually think of evals and build it? It is something that we are really investing in, right? So the idea here again is you need to understand the domain. Recipe bot, pet bot, what is it, right? If you understand the domain, then you need to work with your SMEs, your subject matter experts. I don't know anything about air conditioners except that they keep me comfortable. So if I'm building an application that is supposed to help a mechanic or an engineer who's fixing air conditioners, you need to talk to them and say, okay, I'm building a support bot so that you can ask questions about how, like if there's an error code, how do you fix it? Talk to them. Is this a helpful response? Is this an accurate response? What would be improved, right? So domain sensitivity, talking to the SMEs become really, really important when we think of AI applications. And we don't know what is a good output and what is a bad output, right? So as engineers, as QA people, as product people, it's difficult, right? So what this means is that the role of product engineering, QA is all becoming blurred because everybody has to think about the product. Everybody has to think about what the user is trying to do. From the prompt engineer writing the prompt to the QA analyst thinking about the evals to the product manager trying to imagine what the customer journey is that we're trying to build, right? So anything surprising so far? No, I've stunned everyone into silence. Good. So where are we going, right? What are in Jeavio? We have a number of projects that are now really AI driven, right? So we've gone, when we talked in April last year, we were still in the AI assisted world. People are using Cursor or Copilot, autocomplete, and so on. But what we've learned is that we've suddenly moved into the world of AI driven development, where the job of the engineer is sort of becoming telling the agent or the tool what to do, right? So we've sort of done a lot of work, a lot of learning around things like spec-driven development, right? A spec is basically a set of instructions in English that you give your coding agent, and you get it to do some work, right? So this life cycle here, so we go into planning. So it's a loop, right? You have design, planning, design, implementation, testing, deployment, maintenance, planning. You keep going around in this loop, very common, very similar to what we do in the agile workflow, but a lot of it is now driven by spec-driven development. So there is a framework called GitHub Spec Kit, which provides a set of infrastructure tools for doing spec-driven development. There's a lot of material and training that we can use to understand how we're going to define a spec so that an agent can use it properly. Okay? So that's good. A lot of technical stuff. There's many other learnings that we can cover. But let's take a step back, right? Let's take a step back and look at the big picture of what's happening. Okay? So what do our clients actually want, right? Like I said, we have 5 or 6 different AI projects that are in production. We have a pipeline of different projects that are coming in, right? When we think of AI, the hype is like this. Bhagwan, AI can grant you eternal knowledge, creativity, and the power of a digital god. But what is the client actually asking? Yeah, can you just build me a reliable OCR pipeline, please? Right? So at the end of the day, despite all the hype around this, the problems that we're trying to solve are the same or similar problems that we've been trying to solve for a while. Now, there are new classes of applications, sure. Conversational experiences are relatively new. People want to explore what you can do with chatbots. But on the other hand, things like knowledge management, right? Okay, can we synthesize what we know? Can we make the most of that, right? That is a very big bucket of requirements that we get from our clients. Okay, hey, we have a whole bunch of manuals. We want to we want to make our customer support bot easier. We want to be able to synthesize everything that we know about this legal case so that the lawyer can make better decisions, right? So that's a bucket of knowledge management. There's a bucket of conversational experiences. Hey, we have a current dashboard-driven application. but our users, they get frustrated. It's very complex. If they want to find out some data, they have to navigate a whole bunch of different dashboards. It's really complex to build a new dashboard. We have to mess around with Power BI or with Tableau or whatever. Can we make it easier? Can we just know what is important to them, ask them, and then generate the output, right? So that's a conversational experience. And then there's generally what I call information retrieval. We have a team in Philippines or we have a team in India that their job is to, like, they get messy PDFs, they have to read the PDFs, they have to manually key in the data. Can we make that process automated, right? Can we reduce the amount of time that it takes for these folks to do this work? So again, nothing should be surprising here. These are pretty boring business applications, but they can be accelerated with an appropriate use of AI. Okay. But on the other hand, if you take so that's what we're trying to build, right? On the other hand, things are changing fast, right? So these are sort of tweets from December, January, early this year. Here, everybody's talking about how they have used Claude Code to do something. I think maybe it's hard to read. Let me try and zoom in. So if you look at this one, this tweet here, right? This is by an engineer at Google. Her name is Yana Dogan. And she's saying, we've been trying to build distributed agent orchestrators at Google since last year. I gave Claude Code a description of the problem. It generated what we built last year in an hour, right? Now, similarly, this is Andre Karpathy. Who has come across Andre Karpathy before? Yeah, he's a very, it's one of the best AI educators out there. If you go to his YouTube channel, you'll get some, if you want to develop an intuition of how LLMs work, he's probably the best educator on AI at the moment, right? So even he's one of the founders of OpenAI, right? This guy knows AI well. And he's saying, I've never felt this much behind as a programmer. The profession is being dramatically refactored as the bits contributed by the programmer are increasingly sparse and in between. What he's saying is that the role of the programmer is changing, right? Like we said before. Remember the second framing. There's an inversion. So when we think about what this means in the way that we do our work, we need to say, okay, there's going to be rapid model advances. What does that mean in how we develop our applications? There are going to be product layer improvements, right? So look at Claude Code, for example, right? The underlying model has improved, sure. But what is amazing is that people have figured out how to use the capabilities of these models in order to build a compelling product. And this is going to be the big driving force as we go into 2026 and beyond, is not so much about like capabilities of the models, it's about the product layer. How do we use these capabilities? What is the UX, right? Building a simple chatbot is not going to be acceptable anymore. You need to think of how you expose these capabilities to your users. And then there's this issue, capability overhang. Anybody has heard of this term? So this term, what it means is when people ask the question, AI models are improving so much, then why isn't my day-to-day life changed? In some cases, it has changed if you're a developer. But the idea is that we still don't know what the underlying capabilities of these big models are, right? They are still big black boxes they take input and they generate output. So day before yesterday, when we were doing an exercise here, I asked, we built a simple little app that could answer questions about cricketers. So I asked a question in vernacular Gujarati, right? India no captain kaun cha? I wrote that in English. And the model gave me a response, and it was in Hindi, in Devanagari script. That is weird behavior. Why is that happening? So we changed the model. We changed the model from Claude Haiku to Claude Opus, much more capable model. Ran the same test again. Then it gave the response back in phonetic Gujarati. Same prompt, same application. Because why? Because that model has the capability to understand what the user is asking, map it to its internal knowledge base, and then generate an output that is aligned with the input of the user. We don't know, honestly, what the capabilities of these applications are. Product developers, it's their job to understand how to make the best use of these capabilities, right? Anybody here has seen surprising behavior from ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever tool? Something that really surprised you? Anyone? No, everything, yeah.
Days ago, about it was Gemini CLI. So it can be used as a coding agent, and it will be maintaining logs of the conversation and the task it is performing in the code base in a markdown format.
Right.
So that was like very new
Surprising.
to me.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
surprising to me.
So that's the same thing. Like, you can realize that these models can talk in Hindi, they can talk in Gujarati. You realize that it can go off and sort of, do your expenses for you. I can give Claude Code a folder with all the receipts when I'm doing my expenses. It will happily process the receipts and create a spreadsheet for me with all the expenses. I mean, I just tried it. It just works. Weird, right? Because we don't know what the capabilities are. So what does it mean for developers, right? A lot of your developers, the key thing is product thinking, right? What does the user want to do? What capabilities do you want to build, right? It's no longer about code as much as it's about product and problem solving. So if you're working on a project, if you're starting off in your career, it is very important for you to understand the reason why you're being asked to do this, right? To understand what is the frame that your client is asking you to use in order to build these features, right? Again, if AI is using all your code, you can just go YOLO and just say, yeah, whatever, do this feature. I'm going to go get a cup of tea and watch the cricket. Okay, good, you could try that. However, what I would strongly recommend is don't trust the output. Because even though a model might have done an amazing job in building one feature, when you give it another feature, it may just generate absolute trash. Because these are probabilistic models, right? There's a jagged frontier. Always verify. You are accountable for the output. Can you imagine if you go to your manager or client saying, yeah, there's a bug, but hey, Claude did it. So should we give your salary to Claude as well then? What do you think? Huh? No. So know your tools, right? So again, if you're using these tools, if you're using Cursor or Copilot or ChatGPT, Gemini, regardless, this is not just for developers, for product managers, QA folks, engineering managers, use it for everything. We are going to invest in using this tool. Then try and understand how this thing is going to work. Where does it work well? Where does it fail? When do you need to give it more context? When can we just say, okay, let's go YOLO mode? No problem. I know this thing is going to work, right? So develop an intuition for how these tools are working. And then, as this little meme says, everything new in our industry, there's something new every 6 months, right? Everybody's going to, like I said, that YouTube frames, something is going to change everything. Anthropic just dropped the bomb. Yeah, okay, man, whatever. But at the end of the day, what does Cloud Code use? Oh, it uses the Unix command line. How long has the Unix command line been around for? Who knows? Roughly. Guess. How long has the Unix command line been around for? It's been around for longer than I have, so at least 21 years. No, it's been around since the 70s, right? Actually, early 70s. So it's been around for more than 50 years. And we are still using the Unix command line, despite all the modern SaaS tools, right? Right now, if I want to go and edit something on the terminal, if I want to review a plan that Cloud Code has put together, I fire up VI because I know it's going to work, right? I could go off and launch like, I don't know, Notion or something, some fancy thing. As soon as I launch it, first thing will say, hey, I'm Notion Assistant. I'm like, no, I just want to read this document. Please give me VI, right? So this is known as the Lindy effect. It says the longer something has survived, the longer it will continue, right? This is the reason why religion, Hinduism has been around for, I don't know, 5,000 years, right? It is something that is a truly Lindy phenomenon, right? So it is easy to think, okay, man, we got to change the way that we work and so on. But at the end of the day, problem solving, understanding the basic tools, getting a sympathy for how these applications are working is going to stand you, like it's going to be a lot more advantageous than whatever it is that we've been talking about up here, right? So learn how to use the CLI because trust me, it's going to be helpful. Okay, so what does it mean for managers, right? We have engineers. Some of you or most of you will one day start leading teams or run companies or grow in your careers. What questions are you going to answer, right? So today you are managing people who are writing code. Now you will start to manage engineers who in turn are managing agents who in turn are writing the code, right? So if somebody says, okay, you have a team of 10 engineers, are they productive? What do we use today to determine whether, Vishwas, you tell me, you're an engineering manager. How can you determine whether your team is productive? What do you typically
Looking
use?
at the velocity,
And what do you measure in velocity? What do we typically measure as velocity?
the amount of story points being delivered on regular basis.
That's right.
Sprint by sprint.
Sprint by sprint. But what happens if suddenly people start using AI tools and the number of story points explodes? Does that metric still make sense? Number of lines of codes, number of features, is that because the developer has suddenly become godlike productive, or because they've just put on the YOLO hat and are just saying, listen, cricket match is on, just go build this feature and then come back, right? From an engineering perspective, you are not going to hover over their shoulders saying, hey, look at what this thing is doing, right? You're going to look at, okay, commit has happened, PR has been closed, job has been done. So is that, like, how do you think of productivity, right? So as a lot of the tech leads in this room who are working with teams that are using AI-assisted development, they are dealing with a very big problem right now. Can anyone tell me what that problem is? Bhavik can tell me, because he knows. Tell me, what is the problem?
You spend more time reviewing the code than writing it.
That's right. The job of the tech lead or the EM has become a nightmare, because suddenly what your junior or your engineer was pushing as a PR, right? PR is a pull request, that is a change of code. It used to be pretty tightly scoped, a bunch of lines of code. Suddenly they're vibe coding and you're getting PRs that are like 20 files. It's like, dude, I asked you to add one column. You refactored the whole database. Acha, aisa hua? Oh, I didn't know that. Right? So whose responsibility is this? Is it fair for a tech lead like Bhavik to say, man, I have to work all night to try and figure out what this guy is doing? Right? Or is it the developer's responsibility to say, okay, I just had to add one column in the database. It could have been a simple migration. But instead, this thing has gone and rewritten the whole application to use MongoDB instead of using Postgres. Yeah, but look, functionality works, man. It's great. But now you're giving anxiety attacks to your tech lead, right? So this issue, like we have our SecOps team here, right? So they spend a lot of time thinking of like performance testing, penetration testing, and so on. The other flip side of this is, if you're building these tools, if you don't have an intuition about what is the surface area that you are exposing, suddenly security and performance also become huge problems, right? Because remember, these AI agents are trained on a whole bunch of open source projects. They're trained on code that is on the internet. When they're generating the code, they're getting very good at writing secure code. But when they're generating the code, we don't have a good intuition about how they're making those decisions. Right? So if you say, okay, I want to add a Redis cache, performance is slow, I want to add a Redis cache to my application. Yeah, great. Here is a Docker file. We're going to run this Redis cache in a Docker. Oh, by the way, just go and expose this Docker port and change your security rules in AWS. Yeah, okay, whatever. Just write me a script to do it, Claude. I'm too tired, yeah. Okay, sudo run this script. Oh, now suddenly your Redis cache has an open IP address. Any hacker in the world can go in and see what recipes your bot is serving. Okay, so you're a manager. What makes sense? You're a tech lead. How do you think? What do you tell your teams? How do you use these tools? And these are all, that's why I said, right? Here, I'm giving gyan. Product thinking, this and that. Here, I'm saying, yeah, guys, we're in trouble. We have questions we don't know how to answer, right? So this is something very important. There's a flip side to it, right? A lot of our clients are coming to us and saying, listen, we just raised some money. Investor is saying, look, I'm going to give you this money, but you have to become an AI first company. Yeah, but like, what does that mean? We need to add AI. We need to do something with AI. So a lot of people, even in services companies, there's like metrics. Sabko AI use karna hai abhi. Everybody must use AI. But why? Right? So this is known as Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure. There's a very famous story about this. So in Delhi, in the 19th century, The British had an issue with snakes. People probably know this story. They had an issue with snakes. So they said, okay, anybody who comes in with the tail of a dead snake, we'll give them 5 rupees. They thought, okay, people will go and kill the snakes and we'll get rid of this situation. But what do you think happened instead? People started breeding snakes, right? So if you have a measure, if you're saying as a manager that my team, everybody has to use AI, okay, so we'll use AI, we'll generate slop. Oh yeah, I'm a product manager, I'm using AI to write my PRDs. I'm a QA, I'm using AI to write my test cases. Great, who's going to read them? Is somebody reading your output? Does it actually make sense? I don't know. So as a manager, what are you trying to tell your teams to do? What makes sense, right? So the thing is, you need to develop a culture of learning and accountability. These models are changing all the time, right? How do we build an organization that can learn, that can take this, deploy it? How do you make your teams accountable? Yeah, dude, fine, use Cursor, use Cloud Code, but you are accountable for the work that happens. But how do you even judge it? We get a PR and he says, dude, this is ridiculous. This is like 200 lines or 300, 400, 500 lines of code. No, I read every single line. Okay, how? How do you do it? I mean, poor teachers, high school teachers, professors, essay, homework is an essay. What are people doing? ChatGPT is writing the essay, right? How does that even make any sense, right? Maybe some of your children are feeling this today, right? So I don't know, it's a big question. From a talent development perspective, right? You're an engineer, we talked about how to become, like how to be ready for this role. You're a manager. How do you think about talent? Like who is going to, if the way that we write code changes every 6 months or 1 year, what do I look for in somebody I'm looking to hire? That's not an easy answer either. Okay? So if AI is doing all the work and you have a graduate program that is coming in, how are these people going to learn the basics of programming? So we have our campus champions in Jeavio this year. I talk to them, I do one-to-ones with them, and it was really interesting. One of them said, listen, I started my undergraduate from 2022, in September 2022. November 2022, ChatGPT was released. So throughout my college time, I've been using ChatGPT to help. So what does that mean? Great, they're very good at using these tools. But have they developed an intuition of how software engineering works? Some have, some haven't. But their output looks the same. What are you going to do? I don't know. Another difficult question for us to think about. Any thoughts on these two slides so far? Any questions? Okay, so what are we doing, right? What are we doing to prepare for this new world? We've been thinking about AI. We've been investing in AI for the last 3 years. We are really pushing for the broad and rapid experimentation and adoption of AI tools. And that is across the board, right? So from where we started today's discussion, Adapt, right? Krunal is our tech lead here on Adapt. If you want to talk about nuances of RAG, he's your guy. From looking at Adapt and thinking of, okay, how can we build a platform without any clients, right? When we started this, we didn't have any clients asking for AI. But we knew that this is something that could be an opportunity. So we invested in building our own tools, and we could use that to bootstrap an AI practice. And now we have a bunch of like 50-something developers working on AI projects, right? So we have encouraged the broad and rapid experimentation with the support of our management team. They've been open to invest in this. We've been doing company-wide upskilling, right? So I was joking with some of our Jeavio colleagues that I'm tired of hearing my own voice. It's because for the last 2 days, I've been doing a hands-on workshop with our QA team on how we are going to test non-deterministic systems. How do we think of evals? In August last year, we did an all hands on product. How do we think of rapid prototyping? What is like, how do we think of taking a customer's requirements and converting it, validating it? Can we build a rapid prototype? Can we get some feedback from the customers? And then for developers, engineers, I mean, they've been using, starting from GitHub Copilot to Cursor, all of this stuff for the last 2-3 years. We did a company-wide hackathon at the end of 2024 to push people to think and build an AI tool, right? This is becoming quite by default. If the client will allow it, everybody is expected to use AI-assisted or AI-driven development, right? And then the work that I do, right? A lot of my work, I work as a consultant. I go and talk to our clients. So what happens now, right? Earlier, we would talk to them, we would capture the requirements, go back, think through, make a proposal, iterate on it. That would take 3 or 4 weeks or more. Today, what happens? I go to a meeting. Before the meeting, I do some research, or Claude does the research for me, of what this company is doing, what are some of their products. In the meeting, I capture the requirements. Then I go back and I vibe code a prototype. Then at next meeting, I take the prototype and I show it to the client. Hey, is this what you were thinking? Does this make sense? Do you think we could build something like this as a production app? So that used to take 6 weeks, 2 months. Now it takes 2 days, right? So it means that with our clients, we can really focus on co-ideation. Let's work together. You don't need to give us a fully fleshed out idea, right? We can, by example, work together to build tools to get some feedback, right? We've started to focus more on outcomes, right? Earlier, as any services company will be like, okay, we'll deploy 4 engineers for 3 months, and then you drive the project. Now we are getting more confident to say that, listen, you tell us what problem you want to solve, and you let us solve the problem, right? We focus on the outcome, not so much on the number of people that are deployed. So that type of business will grow. I mean, you're probably seeing this already, like TCS and then the other big service providers, they are releasing earnings. And there used to be a very strong correlation between the headcount and the revenue. More number of engineers are deployed, the higher the revenue gets. But what we're already seeing is that there is a split. What is happening? There are layoffs, right? In all these big providers. But the revenue hasn't gone down. So this is nothing sort of groundbreaking. This is happening all over the world. And then, just building an organization that is ready to thrive in a world where the capabilities of our tools changes all the time, right? So that's kind of the goal of what we're trying to do, how we navigate this company in the next couple of years. So that's the content. If you want to look at some takeaways, the frontier is jagged. Things change all the time. We strongly suggest to start simple and move to more complex workflows. You need to think about what data you give to your AI. This is a context engineering challenge. Think very carefully about evals and testing, because that's where a lot of time needs to go. There's an inversion of constraints. The way that we think about the barriers to building software is going to change. What does that mean from a product management and product planning perspective? And from a developer's perspective, you need to be able to think what the client wants. Can I work with the client? Can I co-ideate with the client, right? And managers are in for probably one of the roughest couple of years of their careers. Sorry, guys. So that's it from my side. I'll be very happy to take any questions, hear any comments. Please say your name when you ask a question.
Yep. Hi, I'm Adnan, and thank you very much for the insightful session. It means a lot. So one of the example that you have given, that you yourself work on rapid prototyping, and there might be some teams who is also building some rapid prototype to show to your clients. But what happens usually when you demo to your client, the next question is when you are going to prod or when you are shipping this. So do you actually use bits and pieces from that prototype, or you scrape that prototype and build it from scratch?
I think it really depends on the project. I think I would say, as a rule, we probably end up scrapping a lot of the prototype, because typically what will happen is that when the client sees a prototype, suddenly they understand that they hadn't thought about a bunch of edge cases, or they hadn't thought about a bunch of requirements, right? So they might have come up to us and said, hey, we want to build chatbot for AC technician. When we show the prototype, they're like, oh, actually, should they be able to upload images? Do we need to add voice? Do we not need to add voice? So the idea of the prototype is to push people to think a little bit harder. It's always easier when you have a model, right? Models are how we understand the world. I keep talking about mental models. My team is sick of it. But the idea is that every model is wrong. But it helps you think through what is the right way of thinking. So typically we would scrap it. We'll build it from scratch because we have a much better idea of what it is that we want to build.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Adnan. Sorry, can somebody get me some water, please? Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. The session was fantastic. So my question is that
Please say your name first.
my name is Janil Joshi.
Daniel.
So my question is basically we know that currently people or the developers we use AI as vibe coding for building applications or any products. So when we are working in a team, so suppose in companies we know that if we are a company is working in a particular project, then they are basically working in a whole team. So if for supposedly I am working on that project, I use vibe coding. So how can I work with my teammates? If I use AI, then I can I can give the pull request of 20 files as you told. So if my partner is also working on the same project, then how can we actually uh, communicate, or how can we fill that gap? Because suppose, for example, I am making the front end. So I built the front end with the vibe coding. My partner is also working on the back end. So both he's also using vibe coding. So how can we connect that pipeline? I'm asking about that. And how can we work in teams using vibe coding?
Look, the answer is very simple. Other people suck, don't work in teams. No, no, it's a very good question. Janil, thank you. I'm just being facetious. What I mean, this is a really, really difficult situation. And, like I said, we are moving towards this spec-driven development, right? So what we mean by that is before we actually start coding, we get consensus on the specification of what it is that we're trying to build. And that consensus can be at a very granular feature level, that I'm building this feature. So together as a team, we write down the spec that this is how it's going to work, right? This is a feature, and that spec gets signed off by your product manager, by your QA team, and it's communicated as part of your team, right? And then when you start doing the development, firstly, don't call it vibe coding. It's just AI driven development, right? Vibe coding has some negative connotations. That is changing, right? It's just another tool, right? So what you want to do is to make sure that you have appropriate processes. When my agent is starting to code, I'm going to give it this spec, which has been validated and well understood by everybody else. So you constrain the behavior of your coding agent so you get more predictable output, right? Now, additionally, now you've got the output, then you need to have consensus on, okay, before I submit a pull request, what else do I need to do, right? Okay, so within the team, you guys agreed that, okay, if you're doing backend development, you need to have 100% code coverage. You need to have unit tests. Fine. So you tell your AI agent, write the unit tests, evaluate what those unit tests are doing, make sure that they pass. Great. That's done. Now, before you raise a pull request, you can say, we are going to have a code review agent, right? So code review agent is something that might be built by your tech lead, which goes through the do's and don'ts of what is expected in this particular type of project, right? So you can run the code review agent and say, make sure that there are no high severity feedback that comes out of it, right? So a lot of this work can be, a lot of the issues that you raise can be addressed through appropriate processes, through using things like specs, and making sure that everybody in your team is on the same page in terms of how we use these tools. I mean, if you use Cursor, I think it's called agents.md. Can somebody correct me? Yeah, there's something called agents.md. I don't use Cursor. I like CLIs, but there's agents.md. So basically that drives, and that can be shared, right? And that can be committed to your GitHub or whatever source control repo. So everybody knows to use that. So you're driving consistency in the type of processes. So does that answer your question?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Please.
Hi, Krunal here, Krunal Doshi. So the session is excellent. I have a question about the product standpoint as a consultant. You were saying that. So sometimes the clients are asking about the AI solutions on some of the problems to build the product. But as a experienced guy, you know that this is not needed with the development of AI. So have you convinced that kind of a prospective scenario? And what's the answer in that case?
I think in some cases they want what they want, right? I mean, if you have a young child, like I have a 3-year-old and 5-year-old, it's very difficult to negotiate with them. So sometimes you can't negotiate with the clients. They're going to say that, yeah, I want an AI solution because this is a metric that I'm being measured against. So, okay, fine, right? But typically what we do is we actually have been doing a lot of work where, just like today's session, we'll have a sort of knowledge sharing session. Look, this is our experience. This is what we think AI is good at today. This is where I think it might go. These are no, because we understand the domain of the client, or we try to, right? So we will have an education session to at least have a level understanding of capabilities of AI, and that allows for a much more productive discussion. So as product people or engineers, like there is an educational aspect that we need to be very cognizant of, right? So you need to be able to say with, like you need to build credibility that, okay, this guy knows what it's doing. And sometimes the way of building credibility is saying no, and here is why we should not do this.
So is there any kind of a revenue calculation perspective on the token-based environment for the AI models or like that?
Yeah, this is a really difficult, really interesting question, right? Like I said, marginal costs are back. So often people will say, yeah, I want an AI application. But you have to say that, okay, if you want it, have you thought through the pricing model? Because we have a lot of experience pricing SaaS apps, right? Like I said, it is very predictable. You have your database cost, you have a cloud cost, blah, blah. It doesn't change too much. It might have a step function as the number of users increases and so on. But here, we have marginal costs. So we need to help them build a model. Okay, so how are you going to price it? Are you going to have like a pay-as-you-go pricing? So what happens if your product suddenly becomes very popular and suddenly your Anthropic or OpenAI bill is ridiculous? Are you ready for it? If not, how are you going to constrain it? Okay, so maybe we will have some sort of pricing which is tier-based. Every month we charge you $50, and for $50 you get 100 credits in AI. A lot of companies are using this, right? Cursor actually also uses a similar thing. So it means that up to 100 credits, it's covered, and then it switches to a pay-as-you-go model, or you have to go up to another tier, right? Or in case of Anthropic, what do they do? They time gate it, right? You have finished your credits, they will refresh in 10 hours. So you wait, you look at the wall, you think about your life choices, and then, oh, Claude is back, let's go, so. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Mehul Pandya. So actually you have shared a very good insight on kind of development cycle, but I wanted to know how did you use AI to kind of manage the DevOps cycle, or I would say rather automate the DevOps? If you can share some use cases or maybe insight.
I mean, I'm not a DevOps expert, but I know that we've been using AI across a variety of different things. So from something which seems trivial but is actually very complex is like analyzing licenses, right? What is an appropriate license to use and so on. So we've done a lot of work in that space. But we've also done a bunch of automated, like building GitHub actions that involve code review or reviewing your Terraform scripts and so on, right? So the nice thing is a lot of DevOps is moving towards code or configuration based anyway. It's becoming declarative. So now when you have like a YAML document or Terraform script, CloudFormation template, these AI models have become really good at being able to reason about it. So you can use it as part of like a validation pipeline. Again, you can use the same pattern. You have a set of best practices that should be used for your DevOps scripts. Make sure that those best practices are consistently followed by your developers. And I think that is just another way of putting a guardrail around how these things are being used. What is interesting is that a lot of companies are now generating documentation which is easy for LLMs to process. So that makes it a lot easier to work on that. So I mean, it's a woolly answer, but I hope it at least addresses some of your questions.
Thanks.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So this is Roshni. So as you already mentioned that nowadays from like manager to the end user, everyone are using AI, like developers, QA, all are using AI.
My mom, my kids, everybody's AI.
Right. So what do you think? Like this is limiting people's creative thinking, analytical thinking, or all the thinking abilities, and what they need to do, like in our field, particularly in a manager or QA developers, what they should do to work with AI and their own thinking level as well. What are your thoughts on that?
What are your thoughts?
I want to know from you.
I think it's a tough question, right? I think I tried to address this in this slide, right? So this is not. I don't think there is a very black or white, black or white answer to this question. I mean, at the end of the day, there are two, you could take a couple of angles to this, right? You could say that, look, everybody lives in a house, right? Does everybody know how to make bricks? No, right? We know that they're put together, we're using it, we know how to live in a house. You could argue the same way that, look, people are complaining about AI agents and so on is going to take away creativity. But in engineering, people have been complaining about this for 100 years, right? We had like first computer programming was like literally plugging in wires from one circuit board to another. Then we had punch cards. Then we had assembly language. Then we had C. Every time this changed, the people who are experts in that saying, these guys are going to forget that actually a computer is about plugging in wires. There's electricity that's flowing in here, right? People, when we moved from assembly to C, they're like, this high level languages, man, how would you even know which register has which field? When we first started having IDEs, it's like code completion, syntax highlighting, you guys are crazy. So, I mean, one angle could be, yeah, okay, this is just a continuing evolution of the way that we build software. So the problem is still the same, that the problem that the guy plugging in the wires in 1943 was trying to solve. We have to process some information, we have to get some output. We are still solving similar problems.
Right.
Just the tooling is changing, right? So, there are many, like there is, yeah, I mean, this is a very deep topic, but like there's the other angle you could say is that, okay, if you are delegating all your work to an AI agent, then how can you even validate the work that the AI agent is doing, right? And there's also a very valid question. If you don't know, then how can you, like, it's like going to a country where you don't speak the language. You're going to Vietnam, you're going for an important business meeting, right? You hire an interpreter, and you're relying on the interpreter to negotiate the business contract. Do you trust the interpreter? Is that somebody who just picked up off the street? Those are very different dynamics, right? So I think what it boils down to again is process. Okay, we understand, like as a company, as a team, we are going to use a particular type, a particular style of AI assisted coding. Now there might be something else that is moved beyond, that is more performant. Okay, in that case, what do we do, right? So in Jeavio, what we do is that we spin off a small team. Okay, you guys are very excited about cloud code or agentic development. Find a problem, go solve it, show what is possible, bring it back together, and then we'll make a call on whether this is something that we want to invest in as a company and really formalize the approach for doing this. So we don't want to stop people from trying to learn and understand and build how these things work, but we want to, I mean, this is hard, right? We don't have a golden bullet here. But the idea is that in a rapidly changing environment, you want to be able to encourage experimentation and learning. On the other hand, you still need to have consistency in processes and thinking to help address some of those challenges.
Okay.
I give you a very political answer.
Yeah, yeah, that's thank you so much on that.
Sure.
Hi, Vijay this side.
Hi,
So I would love to know more about like how you are thinking regarding the building the team. Are you betting more on keeping the fresh talent and then upskill them, or to take the experience, or to make the mix of board around this? So what exactly strategy you are thinking, and what, as per your experience, what is working, what is not working?
So, I mean, it's a very good question. And again, like this is, in this case, we have to take like an empirical, like I said, you have to take a results driven approach. So generally what we're finding is that because a lot of our, like we've been running a graduate program since 2017, 2018. So we're very familiar with like what works and what doesn't work for freshers who are coming in. So, but on the other hand, a lot of our strides that we've made in building AI products has been done by our freshers because they are AI native, right? Remember, they're like using ChatGPT since first year in college. So they have a way of thinking and experimenting that somebody like me, who has 20 years of experience, doesn't have. Like I don't have that mental flexibility to be able to rapidly think out of the box and build something. So typically, to concretely answer your question, the consensus that I think we are developing is that for projects where we are controlling how we generate the output, a small team or 4 or 5 people works much better than a larger team. And in that team, we typically have someone who is an experienced tech lead who can build the specs or who can build the guardrails around like what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And then otherwise, we have a fairly like diverse team of people who are relatively new, people who are sort of 3 to 5 years experience, and so on. The big change is that the way that we build software the speed has increased. So we don't necessarily need to have like a huge team of 10 or 12 people in order to generate the same output. But on the other hand, there's a lot of responsibility and stress, honestly, that goes on the tech lead. So that is something that we are still trying to address. Right? Does that answer your question? Anything I missed?
No, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, any other questions or thoughts? Or I think, yes, please.
Hello, sir. I am Salman.
Hi, Salman.
Basically, what we see in that normally any models come and they claim this much percentage of the performance benchmark and all those things. So as a we have some business domain. So how we build the evals to evaluate the model's performance in our case, because that might not work for our if we have domain something like that.
So your question is, we are trying to build an AI application. It is in a domain that we are not familiar with. Is that what you mean? So how do we actually test? How do we build the evals? So this is a great question. And I think what we are learning is that at the end of the day, as developers or as sort of service providers, like we cannot take the responsibility for the domain, right? So I'll give you a very concrete example. We're doing a project where we have to build a processing pipeline for PDFs. There's some complex data that is in PDFs. We are taking a sort of AI-driven approach to extract that data, right? So the first thing that we built before we are even building the data processing pipeline is we build an annotation tool, right? This annotation tool, you can load a sample PDF and then you can draw on that PDF, saying that, okay, this field is this value. So the idea is that we give that tool to the SMEs, to the clients. And guys, before we actually start doing the development, you need to give us some labeled data about what is good output. What do you actually expect, right? So go off and label 100 documents or whatever many make sense. And then when we take that labeled data, we are going to be using a subset of that labeled data to tell you how accurate this application is. And that will be the exit criteria for this project, right? So we need to push to a certain extent the responsibility of thinking about the domain to the client. And if it is a case, like we've had projects that have failed because the clients were not willing to invest the amount of time that it takes to really test the application and annotate it and give us feedback on the behavior of the application.
And second question, I have right now we see that the code mechanics are too fast because agents doing all those things. So how we define like I need to build this tool or buy this tool?
How much time do you have? No, so look, I'll give you this. This is now there's a whole bunch of articles that have been written, right? Oh, Salesforce is dead, SAP is dead, because why should you pay so much money for a SaaS tool when I can just build something myself and not have to pay $100 per head per seat, right? I think in some cases it makes sense because what typically happens in this big SaaS type models is that as a company, you have to modify your workflow to fit into an existing application. Oh yeah, okay, we are industry, we have to use ERP, we are going to do a big SAP implementation, we have to build a whole workflow. But actually maybe you're just a small business, you have a simple workflow. It doesn't make sense for you to go and do a big SAP installation. In that case, it might make sense to say, look, we want someone to build a very specific application for us, and let's build it fast. And then suddenly, you're not at the mercy of this huge software behemoth who is not going to care for a small client. On the other hand, let's talk about an HR application, Workday or payroll processing, right? What is the ADP? ADP, right? ADP is a payroll processing. So you have to remember that it's not just the delivery of PDFs. ADP is also taking on a bunch of regulatory risk on your behalf. So when you're paying a monthly SaaS subscription to Workday or ADP, you're not just paying for the software, you're also paying for the lack of liability. If something goes wrong in payroll processing, it is not your problem. You call up ADP and say, guys, sort it out, right? So there is this element that we also, like, it's very good to get excited and say, yeah, we're going to build everything. But the reason why these companies exist is not just for the functionality, it is for the infrastructure. That could also be regulatory, could also be like, they might have thought of like 100 corner cases that you don't want to go and reinvent. Okay, we'll take a couple more questions if there's any. But otherwise, we have some snacks. If you are interested in Jeavio, you can go to jeavio.com. The QR code if you're interested in finding out more about our opportunities. Yeah, any final questions, thoughts? Yes, please.
I have a question for the client implementation that I'm doing. I'm a Salesforce engineer, by the way. So we have client business which are into construction equipment, renting out in North America. They have, what they do is when a construction equipment fails, they take a picture, write description, create a case, and they have been doing it in 2017 to 2024. So what I have been tasked is that, is there some kind of AI which takes all the pictures as an input along with the description on why this equipment failed and give a proper output saying that this equipment, these are the common causes of failure, and so that they can create a working SOP document. So do you know any kind of AI image processing tool which can take about 25,000 images along with the description as input?
Have you used Nano Banana Pro?
No, not yet, but yeah.
So look, this is very broad question. Like generally there are vision models. All of the foundation model providers, they have vision models, the multimodal models. They can process text as well as images and in some cases videos. But I think in some, like there's also been tools like AWS recognition, Google's AI offerings, and others that have been building image recognition tools for a long time. So this may not necessarily be like you don't need a foundation model to do this. It just depends on what your domain is. What I will say is that all of the main, like definitely OpenAI and Anthropic, and I think even the model offerings from Azure, they have a vision capability. But the cost element is something to be addressed, right? So they are very good at being able to take an image and describe what's in the image. And then you could use LLM capabilities to convert it into something more structured. That could be a workflow, but what it boils down to is like, what is the accuracy that you're looking for? Does it fall within the cost envelope that makes sense? So, okay, Mehul, yes.
I think this will be an important question for everyone. So if you can share your experience working with best open source AI model.
With open source AI models?
Yeah.
So look, I think it depends on the capabilities that you're looking for, right? And again, these open source models are moving very, very fast. It's hard to know. Like we had Kimi K2? Yes, okay. They love the names, right? Yeah. Kimi K2.5, right? This model came out and they're claiming frontier performance in coding abilities, right? So it's hard to keep up with what's going on. I think typically if you have a constrained problem, especially something like text processing, summarization, sentiment analysis, then an open source model like a GPT OSS model that was released last year, or even something from DeepSeek that is hosted by a lower cost provider, something like Fireworks or Grok, GROQ. So there are low cost inference providers, could be a really good solution, right? However, I mean, but it's like an arms race. Foundation models move, and then 6 months later, the open source models are also up there. But as the capabilities of these models become more, they become more performant, more smart, the cost of serving those tokens also goes up, right? So it may not be as expensive as hitting like Opus or GPT 5.2, but there is still an inference cost that is involved in hitting an open source model that is hosted. Now, you could go off and fire up a big GPU instance in your AWS or Azure, or you could even go bare metal and run like an expensive and pay a couple of $1,000 a month for a machine within your own network and run an open source model, and that might be perfectly fine, right? And for security purposes, it might actually be a good solution because then nothing escapes your tenant. So it depends, to summarize, it depends on what use case you want. Is the performance of the open source models appropriate for that use case? Develop some evals to make sure that you can judge that performance, and then make a call on security and pricing and performance considerations. So not too dissimilar to how you would think about using even a hosted foundation model, right? There's a whole other angle of like on-device models as well. So both Google and Apple are releasing a bunch of APIs like extensions, neural chips on the newer phones. So that could also be a factor where you're doing on-device processing, but that could be open source models, closed source models, and so on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay, please go ahead.
Sir, I am a college student one, so for that purpose, I want to ask you.
Is your name college student?
My name is Sahil.
Sahil.
Yes, I want to ask that I want to build my own AI application.
Sure.
So guide me what steps I need to follow during this development. I want to build my own AI.
You want to build, so I just want to make sure I understand your question, right? Do you want to build your own AI model or you want to build your own AI application?
Own AI model.
Do you have $250 million lying around?
No, I start from scratch.
So, no, it's actually a good question. So I mentioned Andrej Karpathy. So he actually has a really interesting YouTube video. Let's see if I can find it. So if you go to his YouTube channel, he has a bunch of videos where he talks about building an LLM from scratch. I think it's called this one, Building Make More, right? So you could actually do it. It's a really interesting approach about how, this playlist, it's called Neural Networks Zero to Hero. It actually goes through step by step what actually goes into building something, and I think actually builds it up to almost GPT-2 level performance. So there's a whole bunch of material. I think Sebastian Raska also has a book about building neural networks from scratch. So, yeah, this one. This is a pretty interesting book as well. It talks through like what goes into building a large language model from scratch. So if you want to really develop an intuition of like how the actual neural network works, how the backpropagation works, like what are some of the pros and cons about decisions around number of parameters, what type of training you use. I mean, there's plenty of material online, right? It is, if you're really interested in it, I strongly encourage you, do it. I mean, I tried, I'm not as smart, so I kind of bailed after a little bit. But if you're really interested in developing an intuition for it, follow one of these tutorials. I think you'll be surprised at how, like, it's not that complex in terms of how these core neural networks work. Yeah.
Sir, I want to ask another one that how I want to make some unique from another AI models in the market. So your guidance for that.
Can you give me an example of what you mean? Sorry,
in today's market, there are lots of AI, Gemini and all. So I want to build an unique from that. So suggest for that.
So you want to build a model or an application that has capabilities that are differentiated from like Gemini or ChatGPT. What do you, I mean, I'll turn it around. What do you think would be unique?
I want that thing that user can, in short prompt, that get correctly, exactly that the user can get. on that user can think, so that can be provided in short prompt.
So you want to build something where even short prompts can give good results. I mean, actually, you could build. You don't need to build a new model for it, right? What you could build is like a pipeline, right? Which says, okay, user has given me a short prompt. Fine. What do I know about this user, right? Is this like you? If you're building this application, let's take a product mindset to it. I'm building this application. The key goal is that it can give good responses to short prompts. Cool. Who are the typical users? Is it somebody who is tech savvy? Is it somebody who's not tech savvy? Do they understand what is it that they want to do? Are these prompts constrained in a particular domain, right? Are they prompts about studies? Are they prompts about cooking? Are they prompts about something else, right? Or is it general purpose? So understand that. Then you can actually build a pipeline where you take the prompt and then you use an LLM to generate a more coherent and longer prompt by combining the short prompt along with what you know about the user and the context that they're in. And then you can use any other model to give you a good response, right? So if you look at even Gemini or any of these other prompts, so let's go to, right? So if I say, make me a picture of an elephant riding a bicycle. Okay, this is my short prompt. But what is actually happening is that it will go off and it'll actually generate a much bigger prompt by using an LLM, and then we'll take that big prompt and give it to the generative model in order to generate the picture. So if you click on this, there you go. So it's saying I'm envisioning the scene. It's an African elephant. I'm defining the components. I'm analyzing the request alignment, confirming the match, and then it goes off and generates a prompt. So what have we done? Same thing as you're talking, right? We've taken a short prompt. We've used AI capabilities to build a much more coherent prompt. Gemini may know something about it that I like African elephants, or maybe it might know that I'm in India. So when it generates the elephant, it's going to use an Asian elephant, right? So again, the prompt itself is short, but you can inject what you know about the user. You can take what you know about the domain. You can use another model to generate a much more coherent prompt, and then you can have an output, right? So this is not a technology question. This is a product question. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Rushi. Thanks a lot for this informational session. And thank you, everybody over here by sharing your thoughts, your questions, and making this more engaging.